Hi everybody, welcome to lesson 6 on modern existentialism. On this sixth lesson, we're talking about the existentialist ethics, and this is really the first video of the lesson, okay? The first part of the lesson. We're going to start with two conceptions of human nature, okay? So let's start. British political philosopher Thomas Hobbes believed that people are naturally bad or evil, and for that reason, governments are necessary to keep societies functional and people safe. According to Hobbes, without governments, we'll live, and I quote, in a condition of war of everyone against everyone and living in continual fear and danger of violent death. Wow, that's a pretty bleak picture of human nature, don't you think? People are essentially, intrinsically, fundamentally evil. So watch out with people. Stay away from people. But thankfully we have governments, we have laws, we have police officers and that sort of thing to keep us all safe, right? And keep us all in check. Definitely Thomas Hobbes did not have a very favorable view on human beings. And but he was not saying here, he was not establishing anything controversial, let's say, because for centuries in Europe relied on Christianity to sort of understand the world and understand morality. Okay, so for centuries in Europe, that was the main source of moral information, the Bible, right, and Christianity. And according to Christianity, people are born sinful. So, in agreement with Hobbes, people are essentially bad, evil, which is why we need God. We need Jesus to be saved, to be redeemed and transformed. Okay, that's part of the, let's say, the Christian story. So, in that sense, okay, Hobbes was not saying anything controversial, but he was simply establishing and making it very clear how much we need governments. Like this is something we absolutely need. Without governments and without all these institutions, we would be at each other's necks, basically. So life, society, civilization would be impossible without good governments. So, but then there is a different conception of human beings that I want to consider with you, and that is Rousseau's conception of human beings, or human nature, I should say. French-Swedish philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, on the other hand, believed the exact opposite regarding human nature. For Rousseau, people are not inherently bad or sinful, but they are essentially good. The problem is that once people learn the bad ways of society, some of them get corrupt and become evil. So, interesting take, don't you think? People are not sinful. Contrary to what people in Europe were told for centuries, that people are sinful and they need God's grace and Jesus' help and love. Rousseau says something quite revolutionary, I have to say. As a matter of fact, many historians, intellectuals, they believe that Rousseau, with this new notion, this new conception of human nature, he started a very important period in history known as Romanticism, which is a very happy, optimistic view of everything of the world. Because I mean, think about it. Now that Rousseau made this claim, and not just a claim, it's actually, he published a very influentially important paper called Discourse on Inequality. I think it's the name of the paper. Quite influential. And in this paper, Rousseau makes a very, very strong case for his position, being we are not bad, we are not evil naturally, we are not born with sin or anything like that. What happens is we get corrupted in society. So we are not the problem. Society is the problem. So if there's something that needs to be fixed and changed, it's society, not us. So ideally, what we want to do or what we want to have, it's a healthy society, a healthy environment, social environment, and healthy governments, institutions, and so on. Because once again, fundamentally, we are good people. Now, romanticism. I mean, think about this had a tremendous impact and it influenced everyone, philosophers, artists, especially in literature. I mean, everything, you name it. People now they had this new idea in their minds. Gosh, we are good. We are not bad. That's amazing. We should celebrate humanity rather than be suspicious of it and condemn it and see it in those negative lights. We should embrace, promote, celebrate our humanity. So that's kind of like that was the birth of humanism, if you think about it. This idea from Rousseau that we are essentially, fundamentally good. Now, these two accounts of human nature, these two conceptions, Hobbes and Rousseau's, they rely on the idea of determinism, which is a very heavy, very big idea for existential philosophy. Determinism. Now, what is determinism? Determinism is the idea that there is no free will, that free will is an illusion, okay, that people don't really make choices. They think they do, but they don't. All our actions, as a matter of fact, according to determinism, all our actions and even our own thoughts and beliefs, they are determined. They were put there, let's say, by two things. Two things. Our nature and our nurture, or our genes and our social environment. So that's it. There is no free will. Everything we do is the result of these two things, those two influences, our genes and our social environment, our nature and our nurture. That means, friends, that you're not watching this video because you wanted, because you decided, you made the choice of, I think I'm going to watch this video, and here you are watching the video. And it was like your idea. And it's not like you had some agency or anything like that. No, 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 no. No, you're confused. None of that was really your doing. It was all the influences around you, the people you grew up with, the ideas you were exposed to since you were born, all these things, the videos you watched, the teachers you had, the books you read, all these things pushed you in this direction and made you click and start watching this video. So you had nothing to do with it in reality. That is determinism. And friends, to me, if you ask me, it is crazy. It's a crazy idea. Think about it. Like, no, we don't make choices. No, our choices are basically predetermined by our genes and our social environment. We think we make choices, but we don't. Free will is an illusion. Believe it or not, this is a big, serious idea, tremendously influential. It's incredible. Recently, I watched a podcast with a famous physicist, Brian Greene. Okay, you can look him up. Brian Greene. He has published several books on physics, and The Elegant Universe, I think, is probably his most famous book. And this man, he believes in determinism. He thinks, no, people are kind of stupid for thinking that they make choices. They don't make choices. Nobody makes choices. There's no free will in the universe. Everything in the universe is determined at a quantum level, and he gives some very deep, interesting explanation of why there's no free will, why we don't really make choices, there's no agency, so therefore we're not responsible for anything we do in the world. Like, really? Wasn't my idea to start recording, watching these videos? It wasn't really your idea, your choice to start, to watch the video. Wow. Friends, you know what? Even though that sounds crazy, we use this idea, we appeal to this notion of determinism in many ways in our daily lives, like we really, really do. And for example, let's use this example, which I think it's quite something in law. And if you commit a crime, and let's say there's somebody who commits multiple crimes, or somebody kills several people and he's in prison. Okay, and then there's a trial and an investigation. Turns out this man had a terrible upbringing. His parents were abusive. They were pretty criminal in their ways. And let's say this man was abused, neglected, sexually abused, physically abused when he was very, very young. And all this man knew was just vice and criminality. That was his world growing up. And therefore, he grew up with no sense of what's right and what's wrong. All he knew was crime and excess, vice, immorality, etc., etc. So this man is not fully responsible for committing those crimes, because the circumstances, his upbringing, his parents sort of pushed him in that direction. And people in a court of law, this is a good argument to make. And in law, they consider these mitigating factors in establishing guilt. Okay, yeah, the person might be considered guilty in the end, but because of these mitigating factors, maybe he's not going to end up with a big sentence. Maybe he'll be sentenced to, who knows, 10 years in prison or one, who knows. So, but this is a very valid thing to take into account for in law, at least. So you see what I'm saying? The idea is not that crazy. Many people think, yeah, well, his actions were not really his. It was a result of his terrible social environment, parents, upbringing, and the genes, right? That's the other factor. Parents were criminals, drug addicts, whatever, and he also had it in his genes. So, gosh, I mean, this guy's naturally evil and criminal. So, boy, not really his fault. Okay, interesting, right? Now, I remember I had this friend growing up. He was terrible at school, like really, really bad at school. And one day he was explaining to us why he was so bad. And he had a very simple explanation, a very simple deterministic explanation. And it was something like this. He said, well, my parents are not very smart. They never went to college, and they never encouraged me to read, to study, learn things, and that's why I suck at school. And so there you go. Nature and nurture. It's in my genes. It's in my family, runs in the family, being stupid and lazy and being terrible at school and not having academic disciplines. And it's in my genes and in my environment, my social environment. I grew up in that environment, so that's why I suck at school. Okay, that's a deterministic argument. And I hope you see how convenient it is and how it is often used very conveniently to not assume any responsibility or guilt for what we're doing, for our wrongdoing especially. So think about how convenient it is to say, well, yeah, I suck, but it's not really my fault. It's in my genes. It was part of it's because of my social environment. I had a terrible upbringing, childhood, whatever, and that's why I suck. Yeah, I killed 10 people, but it wasn't really mean. It wasn't really my fault because, I grew up in this terrible environment, surrounded by criminality and so on. So people say these things all the time. Okay, and I heard recently, the exact opposite. I heard a couple of students talking about another student who's really, really smart. She's really smart. So I knew who they were talking about. And they were having a similar conversation. They were saying, oh, you know what, why so and so, let's say Clara, you know why Clara is so smart? Oh, well, her parents are super smart. They're professionals and they make a lot of money and they're really, really smart. And, they are like PhDs. And so there you go. That's why she's so smart. And that's why she's so nice. She had nice parents, very smart. So there you go. We have both things, nature and nurture. She is smart and nice because of her genes. It runs in the family. Both mom and dad, they're nice, they're smart, PhDs, and then the social upbringing, the environment. She grew up in that environment, surrounded by books, intelligent people who encourage her to read and learn things. And there you go. That's why Clara is so smart. It's not really like she had something to do with it. So she shouldn't take credit for any of her academic achievements. Like, really, do you really believe those stories? Do you really believe in those deterministic arguments? Because I don't. And again, it amazes me that people who are so incredibly smart, they actually endorse this view of determinism, and they think the world is actually pretty deterministic and that there's no free will and that we're not responsible for what we do. There's no agency. That's an illusion. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, here, both Rousseau, I said right earlier, both Rousseau and Hobbes, they rely on determinism, if you think about it. Hobbes says, okay, we are naturally evil. Okay, that's our nature, right? Our genes are bad genes, right? So we are born with this way, this disposition to be evil, to be sinful, to be selfish, to be aggressive, and so on. But we need a good social environment, or we need good institutions, good governments in our social environment, so we don't end up being criminal and that sort of thing. So we have it in our nature, in our genes, but our and social environment is going to stop us from being crazy. Okay, but then Rousseau says something relying on also on a deterministic idea. Okay, no, Rousseau said, no, we are naturally good. That's our genes. We're good, naturally speaking. But sometimes it is the society that corrupts us. So in the end, if we end up being bad or criminals, it's because of the social environment, because of our nurture. But there's no agency in these accounts, and I think that's the problem with these accounts. Now, it's interesting how recently we had this issue with actually it was a big issue, the Black Lives Matters movement and the protest that started. This was about what, 3-4 years ago, and because of the death of George Floyd. Okay, George Floyd did not really die. He was assassinated, really, and that triggered a series of protests and so on. And people started talking, people in the media, and even influential people like politicians, they started talking about defunding the police, and that became a thing, defunding the police. I remember I would hear almost every single day, I would say every single day in the news, social media, people talking about defunding the police, that this was a great idea, this was the way to go. Like, we had to get rid of our police in this institution because they do more harm than good. And to me, that was quite an idea. I wasn't sure it was a good idea. So what I did, in my philosophy classes, in my ethics classes, I decided to have this conversation with my students. And I said one day, guys, what do you think? Do you think this is a good idea, defunding the police? And to my surprise, most of them, but like by far most of them, like I don't exaggerate if I say 99% of them said, no, this is a terrible idea. And I had this conversation with my students several times in several classes. And they would tell me, no, this is a terrible idea, defunding the police. And I'm like, really? But how come everyone is talking about it like it's the way we should go? No, it's a terrible idea. So when I had the conversation, they told me, it's a bad idea because we feel safer knowing that there's police officers out there. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting. I said, why? You don't trust people? And the answer they gave me was no, we don't. So we feel safer knowing there's police officers out there. We will feel a lot more unsafe with no police officers. So I don't know. I thought it was something interesting to bring to this discussion because it seems like most people have a Hobbesian conception of human nature. Most people don't think people are inherently good, but they think the opposite. They think people are inherently bad. So I think in the end, Hobbes won the argument here about whether people are naturally good or naturally evil. Now, what is the existentialist position regarding this issue of determinism? What is it? Okay, let's find out. Herman Melville. Okay, I read Moby Dick like so many years ago, and I'm sorry, Melville fans. I did not like it, like at all. I thought it was such a long, tedious book, so many digressions, and it was so frustrating for me to follow, to think that okay, there's a storyline in this book. So it was pretty frustrating for me to read it. I read the entire thing just because I'm that kind of reader. I when I start a book, like I have to finish it. But I remember like 40 pages into the book, and I was already ready to just throw it away. But but I found this great quote that I will never forget. It's been with me for many years since I read it. This was probably about 25 years ago. And I've never forgotten this quote. And here it is. You are sharks, certainly, but if you control the shark in you, then you'll be angels. For an angel is nothing more than a shark that controls itself. Okay, to give you a bit of context, what's going on in this story? Okay, as you might know, Melville is writing in the 1800s, and boy, that was a different world back then in the United States. And in this book, he pretty much describes the whole whale catching world, right? And in there is this scene in the book in which there's these sailors, these fishermen catching whales, of course. But the way they used to do it back then was something like this. When you're in a boat out, into the sea and trying to catch whales, you would have to catch two whales before heading back home. Why? Because they would tie one whale on one side of the boat and they will wait to catch another one to tie it on the other side of the boat outside so they could have some balance, right? And then they would be able to navigate back home. And so there's this boat, they're heading back home with these two whales, and then a bank of sharks shows up and started eating the catch. Okay, so one of the fishermen, or sailors, grabs this long oar and start like patting away the sharks, right, scaring them away. And at the same time, he's like admonishing the sharks with these words: "You are sharks, certainly, but if you control the shark in you, then you'll be angels. For an angel is nothing more than a shark that controls itself." That is the existentialist position, friends, regarding our actions. So, yes, um, we might have evil tendencies inside, right? A shark inside. But if we learn how to control this monster, this shark within, then we'll be amazing people. We'll be angels. But that's it. An angel is nothing more than a shark that controls itself. So when you are able to control that shark within, that monster within, you'll be an extraordinary person. Because angels are pretty extraordinary, don't you think? Now, we are not as familiar with the biblical stories as they used to be in the 1800s America. And I'm sure Melville was pretty familiar with the stories. And this is an important point because many people today think of angels as, very beautiful winged creatures playing an harp, dressing in white and very shiny and very beautiful to watch. But if you know the biblical story, especially in the Old Testament, angels were pretty intimidating. They were powerful. They were formidable. Angels had the power to destroy entire cities. So it was not always a great sight to see when an angel showed up to you, right? So that was a pretty terrifying experience. Angels. So yeah, they had the capacity to destroy, but they also had, because they could control that capacity, well, then they were angels, messengers of God, with also, a great powers, right, to do good. So that is the existentialist position. It is true, yes, there are factors, influences in your life, your social environment, your upbringing, your parents, the kind of childhood you had, the traumas probably you suffered. Yes, there is that. And there is the nature part, your genes, your natural tendencies, your personality. These are things we are born with. It's true, there's those things, but we do have the capacity to live our lives our way. So, for existentialist thinkers, determinism is absolutely false. Absolutely false. It's a convenient way of going about, right, and avoiding responsibility. But in the end, the reality is we are indeed in control of our lives and our destinies. Otherwise, otherwise, if determinism was true, there wouldn't be a way to account, to justify extraordinary behavior. And you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking about many people that I've met and I know who they had like very difficult upbringings, difficult childhood, people who lost their parents very early, and I mean their lives growing up were pretty difficult and sad. And yet they end up being great people, like amazing people. And I'm sure you know people like that also. I'm pretty sure. I mean, these people are not super common, but everybody, I would say everybody knows a case of two. A famous example is Tony Robbins. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with Tony Robbins. Is a very important influencer, mentor, coach, life coach, and a man who is extraordinarily successful. He's a millionaire, perhaps a billionaire. And if you're familiar with his life, boy, that guy had a very difficult childhood, like very difficult, very dysfunctional family situation. And yet, he decided to do something extraordinary with his life. Now, friends, being extraordinary does not mean, oh, that you're going to be like a star, a famous person, a celebrity, or that you're going to be a millionaire. That is not what it means, being extraordinary. Being extraordinary means that you are living a life that you think is so rewarding, is so meaningful, that you are so excited about your life that, gosh, that you feel like you're living the best life that you could ever live. And to live that kind of life, you don't need to be, again, like super successful in a financial way. You could be somebody, an educator, a nurse, I don't know, a coach, and you feel like your life means so much to you and to many people, and you feel like you're really, really making a great positive difference in the world. So we cannot be confused with or confuse success with, again, money, because I've known people who make a lot of money and they're so miserable. They're so miserable about their lives. I remember one gentleman that I met about 3 years ago, and he was okay. He was somebody who understood the stock market. He pretty much would sit in front of his computer all day at home. Like, he didn't have an office. He didn't work for anybody. He worked for himself, just investing, putting money in the stock exchange, and he knew how to do that. And gosh, this man made a lot of money, like a lot of money. And yet, he was an alcoholic, and he had all sorts of family issues with his children, his wife. They ended up being divorced. And gosh, I'm not making this stuff up, friends. This is real people. So the thing is, you could be making a lot of money, but still feel like your life is just, it's really not that important. You feel like it's not meaningful what you're doing. You're not doing anything extraordinary. So we all do have this capacity. And this is this is the heart of the lesson right here, friends. What I'm going to say, I'm aware it's going to sound a little cliche. It's going to sound like coming from somebody who is tend to be, or you expect this kind of things from a motivational speaker. Gosh, I hate that term, motivational speakers. But in reality, this is a brutal truth, and it's so profitable if you get to understand it and own it. Okay, here it is. We all, you, me, everybody, we not only have the capacity to be extraordinary, not only we have this capacity, we need to be extraordinary. Like, this is a very profound need. If we feel we're not living an extraordinary life, if we feel like our lives is like average or mediocre, we are going to suffer. We're going to suffer psychologically. We're not going to be in a good place. We're not going to be satisfied with our lives. Even if you're making money and you're successful in society standards, if you don't feel you're doing something great with your life doesn't feel that way, you're going to suffer. So we have the capacity to be extraordinary and the need to be extraordinary. Now, for those of you thinking, okay, yeah, pretty cliche. Yeah, we are super. I remember my elementary school teachers, my kindergarten teacher telling me that I was extraordinary and that we're all extraordinary. Okay, I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to prove it to you. In my classes, every time, and this is every semester, I've been doing this for years, friends. In my ethics class, when we cover the existentialist ethics, and we're at this point talking about determinism and the existentialist position about life, about actions, I tell my students, you have the capacity to do something extraordinary every day, every day. And if you're like pretty creative and pretty determined, you can do something extraordinary every hour. Every hour. we have this capacity. We don't feel extraordinary, right? We feel pretty average, and we're kind of like comfortable, some of us, right? Pretty comfortable with the idea of being average, not getting a whole lot of attention, right? Being a follower. When I hear people say, "No, I'm not a leader. I'm a follower." Gosh. Okay. Whatever. Whatever. I tell my students, you have the capacity to be extraordinary. I'm going to prove it to you right now. And at this point, everybody's like staring at me. And I stand on my desk and I start singing in Italian, loud, like opera. Riscoprire quella strada e quel muro grigio dove mi sedeva ad aspettare il tempo. And start singing, right? And the students, my students are like they don't understand what's going on. And most of the time they clap when I'm done. And I ask them, why do you think I did that? I did what I just did. Why? Are college instructors supposed to do this kind of thing, to stand on their desk and sing in a foreign language? And let me tell you about Italian. I don't speak Italian. Like, I don't. Yeah, I know that song, but I don't speak Italian. So how often have you seen a teacher standing on their desk singing in a foreign language they don't even speak? How many of you have seen that before? Zero. Nobody. Nobody. And I tell them, well, I thought about doing something extraordinary for you guys, just to prove to you that anyone can. Anyone. You can think of something that people are not expecting to see, not expecting from you. You can think of something and do it. So at this point in the lecture, I ask my students, I say, how many of you can do something extraordinary right now? Something that you're not supposed to do, like in a class, in a college class. Almost always, there is this student who raises her hand and says, Mr. Molina, you could do that. And I say, no, 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 no. Don't tell me. Do it. Do it. Whatever idea you have in your mind, do it right now. And then I've seen all sorts of crazy, random, silly behavior from my students, right? But some of the most notable examples. One day, a student just turned to her classmates and she like showed them the middle finger, and that was funny. And then one student, male student, he stood up violently from his desk and grabbed this table and threw it on the floor, and that made a huge noise, and everybody was scared, like everybody in the class, right? And I was like, good job. Next. So really, really, really funny stuff. But the point is, of course, nobody expect a classmate doing something like that. Nobody. But you see, if you were thinking about the idea, just think about the idea that you can indeed do something extraordinary, something people are not expecting. And doing it, gosh, you're going to realize the potential in you. The potential. How about you grab this potential, you own it, and you decide to make something extraordinary with your life? How about that idea? Especially if people around you don't expect much from you. If people around you, your family, friends, they don't see you as, super, interesting person. They see you as an average person, or maybe as a loser. Your family, your friends, they're not expecting much from you. How about you prove them wrong and you do something they're not expecting to see? You becoming an extraordinary person. You absolutely can. But here's the thing, right? It's intimidating. It's intimidating for many people, because many people don't like to get a lot of attention, number one. Number two, many people find it intimidating to take that much responsibility for their lives and their future. because it's a lot more convenient, friends, to use the deterministic argument. Well, yeah, I know my life is not going to amount to much because, that's the way it is. I'm kind of like a loser, not very smart. Not really my fault. I had a terrible childhood. My parents were terrible, and so that's that's what you're gonna get from me. Mediocrity. So don't expect much from me. Okay, yeah, that can be convenient, right? Just put the blame on something else or somebody else, and don't accept responsibility for your life. Okay, fine. Your life is gonna suck though. Are you okay with that? Maybe you are. Or you think you are. You think you are. But you're not okay. Nobody is okay with that idea in mind. I am okay with being an average person. You might think you have an average face or an ugly face. Like I used to believe I had an ugly face growing up. So you might think, yeah, okay, let's say, okay, you had a rough upbringing, okay, and there's some traumas in your life, whatever. You were neglected, you were abused growing up, and that was really, really traumatic, really sad, really difficult. Okay, fine. You can do something about it. You don't have to remain stuck where you are. You can do something extraordinary with your life. Like you absolutely can. And if you don't do it, if you don't try, you're going to suffer because you're not going to be happy remaining in that condition, in a mediocre condition. You're not going to be happy. You're going to suffer for your own good. You can and you need to do something extraordinary, to live an extraordinary life. You absolutely can do it. You know something, friends? Sometimes we meet people who they don't seem very, I mean, they look like losers, like total losers. I'm thinking people in school, everybody had somebody like this, right? A classmate who would sit in the back of the room, weird kid, quiet, maybe, gothic, weird kid. Wouldn't talk to anybody, no friends, always living in his little world, wouldn't talk to people. And sometimes, he get picked on by peers, but most of the time, it was just left alone. Nobody cared about that person. It was insignificant, an insect. And and sometimes those people, they show up to school with a gun and start shooting at people. That has happened quite a few times. Quite a few times. And why? Why did they do that? Simply because they feel they can. They can. They understand they're so insignificant in the eyes of people. They know that nobody think much of them. And they are absolutely seduced by the capacity, the potential to do something extraordinarily crazy, criminal, but something that will get a lot of attention because they know. Yes, after they commit this crime, they shoot at people, they kill a bunch of people, they know they're going to die in the end, but they know they're going to get a lot of attention. They're going to be in the news. People are going to talk about them for who know for years, for years. And there'll be books written about them. So, okay, that's pretty tempting for somebody who is an insect, a roach. Yeah, taking that path. So, if you don't do something extraordinary with your life, friends, you're going to suffer. You can. Sometimes, my students ask me in class, Mr. Molina, what can I do extraordinary today? I said, okay, Mom, I'm good. Okay, you need my help. Fine. I'm pretty creative with these questions and these scenarios. I said, okay, you can go out and start paying attention to people. Okay. And if you pay attention to people, you'll see many people doing Just regular things. For example, if you see a janitor, how many times do we stop and pay attention to a janitor? Somebody, just cleaning a bathroom or something, or picking up whatever garbage. Um, I say, pay attention to them. See one of them and go up to one of them and tell them that you really appreciate what they're doing. Give it a shot. Go up to one of these people who don't seem so insignificant. People walk by them and it's like almost like they were invisible. How about you go up to one of them and say, hey, I've been paying attention. Thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate having a clean environment to work in, or to study. You can do that. And you can make a difference, a tremendous difference in someone's life. You can really make someone's day. That's just one example of the kind of things you can do. You know something, friends? Only not even a week ago, I had a very intense class. I like it. I love it. Intense discussions, very difficult topic. We were actually discussing feminist ethics. So, and you got to understand how difficult this is, right? Me, a guy teaching about feminist ethics. Like all my female students look at me like, So there's a lot of pushback in those classes. And I remember, but it's fun. I finished the class and I had to sit down right outside the building to breathe and decompress. And I was looking and breathing, just trying to relax, trying to just decompress again. And this young man was walking by and he looked at me, this student. He said, hey, mister, are you okay? And I looked at him and I said, yes, I am. I said, thank you for asking. Thank you for asking. That is, friends, paying attention. Pay attention. Look at what people are doing. People around you. Look, pay attention to what's happening around you. If you ask a question like that, you'll be doing something extraordinary. And I say extraordinary because it was in 8 years that I've been teaching, this is the very first time that a student asked me that question. Like he showed concern for me. Really, really cool. I really appreciated it. I really did. And how about you doing things like that on a regular basis every day? How about you doing something with your life and doing something extraordinary, something people are not expecting? You totally can. You have that power. You do. Take the responsibility. It's worth it. Now you tell me. I have presented here two mindsets. Okay, two mindsets. One mindset is the deterministic mindset, which is something like this. Yeah, I know my life sucks. I didn't have great parents. I had a terrible upbringing, and my genes are not the best, so I'm not very smart. It is what it is. Right? It's the typical deterministic statement, and I hear it so often. Gosh, unfortunately, yeah, it is what it is. It is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it, right? Wrong. So tell me, how much do you like that mindset? It is what it is. Well, yeah, I'm not that great. My life is not gonna be great. It's okay. Or how about this alternative? My life has been really rough. I've suffered growing up, and I was abused, and I faced some really, really, really tough times. And I know I have a lot of limitations. I don't have a lot of money, and people don't think much of me. But I'm going to do something great with my life. Tell me, which one of those two mindsets do you prefer? Now, the second one, that's the existential mindset. Don't believe in determinism. You have to be aware of the deterministic excuses. Blame it on other people or the circumstances so you don't take responsibility for your condition. Take responsibility for your condition. Your life, if your life sucks, own it and do something about it. Yeah, maybe you're a victim of some sort and you suffered injustices. Okay, well, you can take those injustices and make something positive out of it. You totally can. Or you can just simply ignore those injustices and keep moving forward to a great place, a place that it's great, it's meaningful. Your own place, your own goal. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? Work hard for it and do it. So one last thing before closing this video. We need a little bit of light, let's say, because it seems like we have these two possibilities, right? I talked about, being really mindful of other people's needs, right? Going out, paying attention and asking people if they're okay, complimenting janitors for their work. Okay, but I also use examples of criminality, being extraordinarily evil. So we need a little bit of light. How do I know my actions and my life, my words lean to the extraordinarily great or the extraordinarily evil? How do I know? How do I know I'm being a shark or I'm being an angel? Now, that's a good question. That's the question to ask right now. We need to understand, okay, we need to have some sort of guidance, values that help us identify, okay, if we're leaning in the right direction. We're leaning towards goodness, greatness, or evil, criminality. We need to know that very, very clear. For many people, it's not that clear, but I'm going to make it clear in the next video. What you don't want to do is to stay in the middle. And boy, there's so many people in the middle. Most people living regular lives, mediocre lives. Don't stay in the middle. Do something extraordinary with your life. Why? Because you can. You can. And you need to for your own well-being. Okay. I'm repeating myself. That means I'm done with this video. Thank you for watching. See you next time.